In Gittin, for almost 4 pages, between page 55 to 58, we hear a story after story about the stories of the destruction, stories that happened just before the destruction or during the destruction of the temple, stories about the evil ways that people behaved to one another, the bad ways that people treated each other. And amongst those stories, there is a story, a specific story that we are going to discuss today and learn today. Let me share the sources, and we are going to learn a little bit about the story of Tzofnat, the daughter of Peniel. And it appears in Gittin Nunchet, and the story is being told in the name of Reish Lakish. Now, Reish Lakish was an Amorah from Eretz Israel at the second generation. He lived over 170 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. But the memory of the destruction was so vivid in the lives of the next generations, especially in Eretz Israel, but also in Bavel. And when the Chachamim are telling the stories, they're telling the stories as if they knew the people and they know what and they knew, from close what the story is all about. And in this story, we are entering an area where it's not clear whether this is a real story, so to speak, that happened, or it's a typological story, an allegory of the situation that happened to the people of Israel during the destruction, whether it was the first destruction of the temple or the second destruction of the temple. And the story goes like this. There was an incident involving a certain woman named Tzofnat bat Peniel. And why was she called this? She was called Tzofnat because they would all gaze, litzpot, the verb in Hebrew, at her beauty. And she was called Bat Peniel because she was the daughter, the Bat, of the high priest who served in the innermost sanctum, Lifnai veLifnim, of the temple. And just that introduction to the story, we can say a few things. One, he is talking about a certain woman, but her name sounds such a typological name. Someone who everyone looked at, watched, gazed at. But Tzofnat is also a name in Hebrew, which means something which is tzafun. There is a hidden secret in her name, in her being. And she is the daughter of the high priest. But high priests, especially in Beit Sheni, were mostly corrupted. So was her father corrupted? Or we are talking about a different father that is the father of this very beautiful, secretive persona here in Tzofnat bat Banech. Maybe we are talking about God, who we can see only lifnai veLifnim. And the Reish Lakish is hinting here about the relationship between the father, who is from high places and inner places, and the daughter. And who is the daughter? Maybe the daughter is the people of Israel. Maybe the daughter is the city Yerushalayim. So what happened to that beautiful woman, Tzofnat bat Peniel? And it happened that she was taken captive, and her captor abused her and raped her all night. Now, the English here is keeping the place where this capture came from. And the person who captivated her in the Hebrew called Shabai. And Shabai can mean someone from Shva, which is further in the area of Ethiopia, Kush, or it can be someone from Bavel, or it can be someone from Persia, or it can be a Greek person or a Roman person. It's a name. It's a general nickname for a foreign person who fights against the Jews, and he take her captive. Now, the reality of many, many, many Jews, men and women, some say tens of thousands, some say hundreds of thousands of captives in the second destruction, the war that caused the second destruction of the temple, and they were all taking all over the Roman Empire. So it is a realistic story about an enemy captivating, taking a girl and abusing her, and then wanting to sell her to be a slave. So he abused her all night. And the next day, he dressed her in 7 garments. Again, why 7 garments? We can think of many reasons, but we have to move on. And took her out to sell her. A certain man who was especially ugly came and said to the man who was selling her, "Show me her beauty." Now, of course, the ugly man here is coming to is the opposite of that beautiful, secretive woman that everyone's gazing at. Okay, he's the total opposite of her, and he's the one who wants to buy her, but he wants to see her beauty. Now she is dressed with 7 garments, and obviously it's not enough for him to see her face. He wants to humiliate her also by seeing all her body. And he's saying, "Show me her beauty." And he said to him, "Good for nothing. If you wish to buy her, for there is no beauty like hers in all of the world. Everyone knows her beauty. What do you want? What do you need to see more?" But the potential buyer said to the seller, "Even so, I wish to see for myself." And he removed the 6 outermost garments, and then she herself tore the 7. For some reason, he takes off only 6 garments, and he's leaving her 7th, the one that is covering her. He doesn't touch it. But then she herself tore the 7th and rolled in ashes. And she said before God, Master of the universe. And here is another important moment. She doesn't turn to the buyer or to the captive or the captured. She doesn't ask the men who are dealing about her and beg for her life. She ignores everything around her, and she turns to God and she says, Master of the universe, even if you have shown no pity to us and have allowed us to be disgraced in this way, why have you not shown pity to the sanctity of your mighty name by which we are called? But I think in a deep way, what the Midrash here is saying that this woman said, Tzofnat bat Peniel said, is she turns to God and she's telling him, do you understand, God, that when we are being disgraced, you are being disgraced as well? When they're torturing us, it's as if they torture your holy name. And then, and with regard to her and others like her, Jeremiah lamented. And here, Reish Lakish, who tells the story, says, she's one. There were more like her. And in that way, she can definitely be a woman that represents not only other women and other daughters of the people of Israel, but what happened to the people of Israel, Knesset Israel, what happened to the city of Jerusalem. And Jeremiah, the prophet of the destruction, is lamenting, and he's saying, "Oh, daughter of my people, says Jeremiah, gird yourself with sackcloth and roll in ashes. Make your mourning as for an only son, most bitter lamentation, for the spoiler shall suddenly come upon us." And says the Gemara, it is not stated upon you, again, that the spoiler suddenly came upon you, my daughter, the daughter of my people, but it says came upon us, for the spoiler shall come as it is were, both over me and over you. And here the explanation in the English says God himself shares his pain, and his name is also disgraced. And the prophet Jeremiah, and if you want to see the pasuk, it's in the book of Jeremiah in the Hebrew, when Jeremiah is talking to the daughter of my people, Bat Ami, and he says, Pitom yavo shoded aleinu. And Resh Lakish is connecting that pasuk, or the Gemara connecting that pasuk to the story of Bat Peniel, of Tzofnat, that is turning to God, and she's telling God, God, it's one thing that you brought this upon us, but through our disgrace, your name is being disgraced. Your name is being destroyed as well. And that's why, as the spoiler will come upon us. What's the us? The us is you, God, and me. That means all of us together with God. This is all happening to us. And the fact that one of the stories of the tales of the destruction, as I said, through page Nunheit and Chet 85 and 65 to 55 to 58, there are stories there that women are part of the stories. And one of the things that we remember, that when Yirmiyahu in the book of Lamentation in Megillat Eicha, women are having a key role in the book, in the Megillah, not only as figures that are suffering during the destruction with the women eating their children, but also the fact that the Navi, Jeremiah the prophet, is using the motif of a woman to describe the city. And he says, alas, lonely sits the city, once great with people. She that was great among nation, is become like a widow. The princess among states is become a thrall. And Tzofnat bat Peniel, that everybody used to gaze upon her. The city of Jerusalem, the beautiful city that everyone, including Greek people and Roman people, who used to glorify the beauty of the city, now nobody is looking at her beauty because of what happened to her. And indeed, Megillat Eicha, that's at the first distraction. And maybe Resh Lakish is talking about the second distraction, but really it's the same thing. Same things happened. And continue Yirmiyahu and says, gone from fair Zion are all that were her glory. All the precious things she had in the days of old, Jerusalem recalled, in her days of woe and sorrow, when her people fell by enemy hands, with none to help her, when enemies looked on and gloated over her downfall. And again, I think these are all strengthening the fact that the story of Tzofnat bat Peniel could very much be not a real story, even though things like that definitely happened, but it's an allegory for the situation of the people of Israel and the situation of Jerusalem. And the one pasuk that Yirmiyahu is using in chapter 2 in Eicha, in pasuk Yutet, he says, "Arise, cry out in the night at the beginnings of the watches. Pour out your heart like water in the presence of the Lord. Lift up your hands to him for the life of your infants who faint for hunger at every street corner." And here what Yirmiyahu is telling us is calling the city, and he's calling the woman, and he's calling the people to rise early and to cry out in the night, to pour the heart like water in the presence of the Lord. And the lamentation became the role of women for many, many, many hundreds of years. And indeed, it was a job. It was something that women in the Near East, the ancient Near East, used to do in different cultures, not only in almost in every old culture in the past. It was the role of women to know how to whine, to know how to weep, to know how to cry, in order to rise the hearts, to mourn and to cry and to pour the hearts. And the role of the women as the mekonenot, as the ones who are pouring their hearts and crying out, we can hear it also in Yirmiyahu and in the book of Jeremiah, when he says that destruction is about to come. He turns to the women and he tells them, "Hear, O women, Hear, O women, the word of God. Let your ears receive the divine word, and teach your daughters wailing and one another lamentation." He's telling Yirmiyahu, he's telling the women, get prepared. You should know your jobs as the ones who know how to lament, and you should teach your daughters, because soon you will be needed in order to cry of everything that is happening in the city. And it doesn't really matter whether it was the first temple or was the second temple, the situation of Am Israel being punished, being destroyed, going through horrible situations, and the temple being destroyed, and the people of Israel, spreading all over the land, is more or less the same. And I want to add with a story from a different time that is capturing the idea of the motive of the woman, which suffers but also laments and cry out her heart to Hashem and ask for redemption. And the story is a story about a student of the Ari, in Ha'ari HaKadosh, from Tzofnat of the 16th century. And the story goes like this. And he went into isolation for 3 days and nights of fasting in sackcloth and ashes. And after 3 days, he went before the western wall and prayed there and wept greatly. While there, he raised his eyes and saw upon the western wall the image of the back of a woman. And I do not wish to describe here the clothing she was wearing, to preserve the honor of our Creator. It's very clear to him in his mind that the vision or the image of the woman that he sees from her back, who's wearing Evel clothes, who's wearing lamentation clothes, and weeping, and maybe she's wearing even torn clothes, and that echoes the story of Tzofnat bat Peniel. She is, an image describing the sorrow and the crying and the lamentation of the Creator. And just as I saw her there in that state, he prostrated himself on the ground and shouted and cried out, "Mother Zion, woe to me that I have seen you like this." And he gives an interpretation to what he understands. Who is the woman that he sees crying on the western wall with Evel, with grief clothing? And he says, this is Mother Tzion, Zot Ima Tzion. That's the woman from the Lamentation of Jeremiah, maybe from Tzofnat bat Peniel. And he sees her in such a state, and he falls to the ground and he cries, and he wailed and pulled out his hair from his beard. These are actions of grief, a burdened head, until he fainted and lay down and fell asleep. Then he saw in a dream that she came and placed her hand on his face and wiped away his tears from his eyes and said to him, "Be consoled, my son Avraham, for there is hope for your future, and the children will return to their borders." And here the story ends, not with a terrible situation of the destruction, in the midst of the destruction and the suffering of the people, but in 16th century, and he dreams of Mother Tzion wiping his tears and giving him hope. There is hope for your future, and the children will return to their borders. And maybe one more word about why do we have in Masechet Gittin all these stories about the destruction? It is definitely come to tell us that the way that Chazal understand what happened, definitely to the ones who were closer to the events of the second temple, but even later, they experienced the event as God, the husband, giving the woman Am Yisrael something close to a get, and he's getting further away from her. And that experience, they felt to include that experience of exile and destruction of the temple, and the feeling that, where is God? He left us, in the Masechet that discusses the separation between a husband and a wife. But there's always hope. As they finish here, the children will return to their borders, and there is hope for your future, for our future.